Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 260. The Double Bigamist. Thank you again to Mélanie Méthot, who allowed me to use her blog as a basis for this episode. I will place a link to her website, The Bigamy Project, in my notes. William Eric Hamilton was the eldest of 15 children, and he was born in December 1907 in Emmaville, a small and isolated mining town in New South Wales. He was born to William James Hamilton, who was 27, and Ruby May Rummery, who was 18 at the time of his birth. His father was a tin miner, and they moved to Surry Hills, a suburb of Sydney, in 1928. He was the only child of the family that seemed to have trouble with the law. At the age of 18, on the 24th of July 1926, he began his criminal career by breaking into the home of Jack Tick of Cootamundra and stealing several items of clothing valued at £17. On the 5th of October 1926 in the Cootamundra Herald, it said, William Ernest Hamilton, notice already how he's adjusting his middle name, pled guilty to, on the 24th of July at Bigamist, breaking and entering into the residence of Jack Tick and stealing 2 suits of clothes, a shirt, tie and boots, and also feloniously receiving the goods, knowing them to have been stolen. The police knew nothing against the defendant, but a letter from his mother was handed to the judge in reply to a message from the police. The defendant said he'd never been up before and would like to benefit the First Offenders Act. He could get a surety from Condobolin. He was remanded for sentence, so I'm assuming that he got off, as the next we know of him is a few months later on the 20th of February 1927. In Sydney, William Eric Hamilton, 19, of Surry Hills, Sydney, was sinking a well at Dubbo when 40 foot down 3 charges of dynamite were set and Hamilton was being drawn to the top. He overbalanced and fell to the bottom amongst the dynamite and sizzling fuses. At once, he grabbed 3 plugs of dynamite from their sockets and saved himself from being blown to pieces. He was admitted to the Dubbo Hospital with a fractured thigh, abrasions and shock. Between June and September 1928, his prison record lists 3 charges. It began when he and another man, John Piper, broke into the store of William Maitland and Company in Condobolin and stole £10 worth of merchandise. On the 23rd of May 1928, in the Locklander and Condobolin and Western Districts Recorder, William Ernest Hamilton, 21, and John Piper, 18, were charged that on the 8th of May 1928 they broke and entered the shop of William Maitland and Company at Condobolin and stole certain goods. Sergeant Purtell deposed, I produced the depositions of John Thomas Mann taken at Bogangate Police Court on the 10th of May and statements signed by the accused Hamilton and Piper. The statements have shown to them in the court that they admit that they are statements signed by them. About 9 a.m. on the 9th, in response to a telephone message, I went to Maitland and Company's store in Bathurst Street, Condobolin, and I saw the manager and had a conversation with him. I went into the back store at the back of the shop and saw the door had been broken open. I then went to the back door of the main shop and found that it had also been broken open. The wood of the back door had been cut away and exposed the tower bolt by which the door had been fastened on the inside. I entered the shop in the men's department and saw a lot of clothing disturbed there, and 2 candles half burnt lying on the floor. I saw some old clothes, 2 dirty shirts, a pair of navy blue serge trousers, a pair of socks, a pair of old black lace-up boots, a pair of old black lace-up shoes and a leather belt. I took possession of them and took them to the police station. I also found a razor at the back of the shop. The razor has been claimed by the accused Hamilton as his property. The navy blue trousers, black lace-up boots and old shirt were claimed by Piper. Also, the shirt and black lace-up boots and socks were claimed by the accused Hamilton. On the 11th, I saw the 2 accused in the lock-up at Condobolin. I heard them admit to Constable Costello that they'd broken into Maitland's store and stolen the articles, including 2 boxes of cigarettes, 3 watches, 2 pencils, 2 cigarette cases, 4 handkerchiefs and 2 leather watch guards. The total value with the clothing was £10. Constable Costello continued, they admitted to using the razor that was found for the purpose of cutting away the woodwork of the back door. They admitted taking the goods produced. They'd broken into the store at 1 o'clock in the morning. They said that they were a couple of hours in there, and they kept the light hidden for fear of the town night watch seeing it. After leaving the store, they made along Parks Road, and then they walked along the road 5 or 6 miles, where Piper rested and went to sleep. Hamilton continued walking, and about daylight a man came along, driving a car and had Piper in it. They both got a ride to Bogangate. Constable Chalmers said on the Friday morning he saw the two accused in the Bogangate lockup. He escorted them to Condobolin Police Station. On the train, Hamilton asked him had he been to the Dubbo show, and the witness answered that he was at Dubbo just before the show. Hamilton said that he was working there at a sideshow, and he and Piper came from there through Forbes and arrived at Condobolin on Tuesday night. They were in Condobolin for a while and walked back again across the bridge. All these statements were made by them voluntarily. Sergeant Mann from Bogangate Police said that on the 9th at 8 p.m. I was told something on the telephone. I arrested the two men this morning at 9 o'clock. I said to both of the accused, where were you last night? They said they were at Monami. I said, where did you come from this morning? And they said, Forbes. Where did you get the boots that you're wearing? They made no reply. I searched them. Piper had a watch, a cigarette case and a tin of cigarettes. The statement of John Piper of Dubbo was, I was at Condobolin on the 8th. I took the boots that I wear from Maitland's store. I also took trousers, shirts, cigarettes, a tie, watch, chain and belt. I broke into the store at 1 a.m. on Wednesday. The statement of William Ernest Hamilton, on the 8th I was in Condobolin. About 1 o'clock on Wednesday morning in company with Piper, we broke into Maitland's store and took many articles. Bail was not asked for. While awaiting sentencing, William committed yet another breaking and entering offence, this time stealing shoes and gramophone records. On the 15th of August 1928, in the New South Wales Police Gazette, William Ernest Hamilton, 19, charged with breaking and entering the dwelling house of Alan Lloyd and stealing goods to the value of £9, has been arrested by Sydney Police. He pled guilty to receiving, and he received 2 years hard labour in Long Bay Jail. He was bound over to appear and receive sentence if called upon within 2 years. This condition was that he remain under his father's control and not leave him without his consent. So he basically received a 2-year behaviour bond. In his jail record, it stated that for the earlier offence of breaking into the store, he received 1 month's hard labour, and that was combined with the breaking and entering offence of 2 years. To be served concurrent, so as a result, it's a total of 2 years. So just short of the required 2 years of good behaviour, he graduated to armed robbery in Sydney on the 14th of March 1930 when he and an unnamed accomplice robbed a petrol station. In the New South Wales Police Gazette on the 19th of March 1930, in Manly, description of 2 men, names unknown, armed with revolvers, at 3:30 a.m. on the 14th entered Strong's garage in Sydney Road, Balgowlah, demanded money from Richard Martin, the night attendant, and obtained £1.07. The first is about 19 to 22 years of age, 5'6", thin build, fair hair, dressed in dark clothes, a cap and sand shoes. The second, 19 to 25 years of age, 5 foot high, thin build, similarly dressed, a white and brown handkerchief covered the lower portion of their faces respectively. And his identity was uncovered on the 14th of April 1930 in the Sydney Evening News. Convicted at Sydney Sessions today of robbery under arms, William Ernest Hamilton, 22, labourer, was remanded by Judge Armstrong. It was alleged that early on the 14th of March, 2 men wearing masks and carrying revolvers held up Richard Martin, a garage attendant at Balgowlah, and robbed the till. The accused in evidence put forward the alibi that on the morning of the 14th of March, he woke up after having gone to bed early the night before and found that someone had shifted his clothes from his place where he put them overnight. He said that on a previous day, another man living at the same house had tried the clothes on, and they fitted him as well as they did the witness. He did admit previous convictions. However, the victim positively identified Hamilton as the man that held me up. So Judge Armstrong did not buy his flimsy claim, and Hamilton received a 2-year jail sentence. Between offences, he succeeded in gaining the heart of a girl 5 years his junior. The pair ran away together, but not before the father of Ruby Pearl Kendall charged Hamilton with abduction. On the 16th of February 1932, and the Glen Innes Examiner, charged with having abducted Ruby Pearl Kendall, 18, Eric Hamilton, 24, was committed for trial at the Newtown Police Court today. The police produced a statement in which the defendant said he'd known the girl for 5 years. She had told him that her mother ordered her from home. They slept at the back of the Matraville golf links that night and afterwards went to the Brighton unemployed settlement where they've lived since. Hamilton said he loved the girl and would marry her. Ruby Pearl Kendall said that at her suggestion, the defendant met her on the 10th of January. They spent the night in a park and on the following morning walked to Brighton Les Sands where they stayed all day. She returned home at night, but her mother told her she never wanted to see her again. She went with the defendant to Brighton the following day and stayed in an unemployment camp for 3 days and nights until a woman gave them shelter. She was 18 and had gone with the defendant of her own free will. The defendant said he would marry her, but she would have gone with him even if he had not made that promise. The defendant in a statement from the box said he asked her if she would marry him and she said she would. If I had been working, I would have married her the following day, he said. I still intend to marry the girl, even if I have to wait until she attains 21 years. Hamilton was allowed £100 bail. So as a result, Kendall's father dropped the charges. He would have been facing a potential sentence of 14 years if the charges hadn't been dropped. They wed a week later and stayed at the Wilsford Street Hostel in Newtown for a couple of weeks. Hamilton suggested that his wife go on a trip to her sister's home in Yanco. Yanco was 600 kilometres from Sydney. His wife was pregnant at the time. Ruby agreed to go on this holiday. She was completely unaware that her husband had been courting a young, beautiful blonde called Marjorie Catherine Ingram. Marjorie had met Hamilton in May 1934 and was swept away. The young couple went on several dates and he soon proposed marriage. With his wife out west, Hamilton tried to go through with a form of marriage with Marjorie at Glebe's St John's Anglican Church on the 6th of August, but the minister received a message, presumably from Hamilton's mother-in-law, letting him know that the groom-to-be was already married. Determined to marry Marjorie, Hamilton took her instead to the Annandale Registrar office just around the corner where the ceremony took place. He married under the name of William James Hamilton, which was actually his cousin's name. He stated he was a sailor on the HMAS Penguin, a bachelor, 23, and that his parents were Peter Hamilton, and it's a little hard to read, but I think it's Maud Roselt is what he named as his mother. Interestingly, his brother George was in fact in the Navy and actually served on Penguin 2 in 1939. So it seems like he's taken his cousin's name and his brother's occupation to create an identity for himself. The couple moved into the home that he shared with Ruby. Ruby's mother contacted her about 2 months into her holiday in Yanco, causing her to come home and, no doubt, would have found Marjorie living in the house. It seems likely that her mother told her about his shenanigans and Ruby moved in with her mother at Surry Hills. The marriage to Marjorie was brief but apparently happy. According to Marjorie, about a month after marrying, though, Hamilton abruptly left home and never returned. On the 13th of November 1934 in the Newcastle Sun. In Sydney, defendant is a dangerous criminal. We are apprehensive that if released he'll do harm to the witness, said the police prosecutor, Constable Mills, at the Glebe Court today, when William Eric Hamilton, 24, timberman, was committed for trial on £100 bail on a bigamy charge. The witness referred to was his wife, Ruby Pearl Hamilton. The police added that the defendant had been convicted of robbery under arms and breaking and entering and receiving. The charge set out that on the 22nd of February 1932, Hamilton married Ruby Pearl Kendall at Surry Hills, and then on the 8th of August 1934, at Annandale, went through a form of marriage with Marjorie Kathleen Ingram while his wife was still living. Constable Hind interviewed the defendant on the 7th of November, who admitted he had committed bigamy. When asked whether he was aware that his wife was shortly to become a mother, he replied, according to Hinds, "I am not responsible." Defendant said he knew the woman that he had bigamously married before his wife went to the country. He told me that he sent her to the bush to get rid of her so he could marry another woman. Ruby Pearl Hamilton said that the defendant asked her if she would like to go to her sister's at Yanco, but after being away 2 months she returned home as a result of something her mother told her. When the defendant asked her if she would live with him again, she replied no. Marjorie Kathleen Ingram said Hamilton had posed as a single man and told her he sent his sister to the country. They were married and went to live at what he said was his sister's place. After a month he walked out and never returned. Hamilton from the dock said, "Marjorie, were you happy when you lived with me?" And Marjorie replied, "Yes, I was, Bill." "Will you live with me if I get a divorce?" She said yes. Mrs. Hamilton was recalled at his request. "If you won't live with me, will you give me my divorce?" he asked. "No," replied the wife. In an effort to avoid jail, Hamilton wrote a letter to the sentencing judge on the 15th of November 1934. "Your Honour, since I have committed this offence, I left the woman I married and went to live at Wyong. While there, I was offered a chance that only comes to a man like me once in a lifetime. When I was arrested, I was working on relief work. My chance was that I can buy a piece of ground at Wyong with every chance of starting life in an honest and straightforward way. Now, Your Honour, I am going to ask you to make this statement into your greatest consideration. I know I am asking a great thing when I ask you to suspend my sentence and enter a bond of good behaviour. I have already had 2 bonds previously, one in 1926 and the other in 1928. But I have done 4 years jail since 1926, and I have a good record so far as my conduct in jail is concerned." On the 2nd of December 1934 in the Sydney Truth, William Eric Hamilton, housebreaker, robber, gunman and abductor, has now included bigamy in an imposing list of previous convictions, and with supreme confidence calmly asked the judge last week that his depredations in the past be overlooked and be allowed to obtain his liberty under the provisions of a good behaviour bond. But after expressing sympathy for 2 wronged women, the judge sternly ordered Hamilton, an ingrate of the worst kind, spend the next 23 months of his life behind prison bars. The sentence imposed by Judge Thompson is richly deserved, the circumstances of the whole case providing an unparalleled example of base deception, which now leaves one woman, as yet a girl, with the ordeal of motherhood again before her. After the marriage, the couple went to live at Newtown, subsequently sharing Hamilton's parents' home in Surry Hills. But things were bad, and eventually Mrs. Hamilton was forced to live at Canon Hammond's hostel at Glebe for 5 months. During the married life, the domestic path was not at all rosy. Hamilton's predilection for the opposite sex caused one separation. The child is only 11 months of age, but has never been supported by its father since its birth. The young wife is going to have another child. After leaving Canon Hammond's hostel, Hamilton, with an air of generosity, asked his wife if she'd like a holiday. In reality, as he later told the police, he wanted to get rid of the girl. In the meantime, Hamilton, who met a pretty young Annandale blonde, had set the foundation to a most daring deception. Marjorie Kathleen Ingram, a pretty and popular shop assistant, was fascinated by the plausible but lying tales told by Hamilton. They met in George Street, Sydney last May, and a quick courtship during which he told her many lies followed. Lies fell easily from his lips, and after telling the girl that he was single, he even went so far as to give his true address. The presence of female clothing in his room presented embarrassing moments, and he simply told his sweetheart that they belonged to his sister, who was away on holiday. Known by several aliases, Hamilton has had several convictions for breaking and entering and stealing. He has served a sentence of 2 years jail for armed robbery and, according to the police, is a dangerous criminal. Dealing with the charge of bigamy, Hind said, "The form of bigamy charged and admitted by the prisoner is one of the worst in character within my recollection. The prisoner had 2 children by his legal wife, one of which is still alive. His wife is also in a certain condition. Apart from his criminal career, he is one of the worst liars I've had anything to do with in my police career. Early this year, he complained to the police of having been assaulted and robbed. It entailed a considerable amount of police investigation to establish that the charge was without foundation. When he was arrested on the present charge, he seemed to treat the matter as a joke. One of his troubles is obviously his weakness with the opposite sex. He addressed Your Honour and said, "If you release me, I will do everything in my power to provide for my children. My wife is to have another child and I'll work and provide for it. Give me a bond, Your Honour, and I'll promise to leave the city within 2 hours, go to Wyong where I can get immediate work." Judge Thompson said, "Your past conduct and your behaviour in this case do not entitle you to the leniency you ask. You have wronged 2 unfortunate women, one of whom has yet to face another ordeal. I sentence you to 23 months jail with hard labour." He served 19 of the 23 months in Long Bay Jail, and William came back to Ruby. At this stage, she was a young mother of 2 daughters and been living with her brother-in-law and his wife while her husband was in jail. The couple reunited only long enough for her to get pregnant again. William left Ruby as soon as he found out about her pregnancy. He moved to Queensland and seemed to settle down for a few years. In October 1939, he enlisted in World War II under the alias John Jakeman. He listed Maud Ovaltine Martin of Brisbane as his next of kin and stated it was his best friend. He also stated he was born in Gladstone, Queensland. He'd made himself a year younger than he was and stated he was an assistant mechanic. In January 1940, he was hospitalised with gonorrhea and re-hospitalised for the same condition a month later. Under John Jakeman, an engagement was announced in the Brisbane Telegraph on the 18th of March 1940. Jakeman Bury, announcing the engagement of Miss Dorothy Florence Bury, elder daughter of Mr. and Mrs. J. W. Bury of Oxley Road, Sherwood, to James Jakeman of Cairns. Interestingly, on his army record, he was recorded as being AWOL on the 18th of the 3rd, 1940, so the day that the announcement of the engagement was in the paper, and that on the 20th of April 1940, he was deficient, and that he's still deficient of equipment and articles to the value of £13, 7 shillings and 2 pence. A court of inquiry was held at Ingleburn on the 20th of April 1940. While still legally married to Ruby Hamilton, he married Dorothy Florence Bury in Brisbane in April 1940. On the 19th of September 1940, Hamilton joined the Royal Australian Naval Reserve under his new alias James Jakeman and listed his next of kin as his wife Dorothy F. Jakeman. He listed his date of birth as the 14th of June 1912, making himself 5 years younger, and this time his place of birth as Bundaberg, Queensland. A son, John, was born in January 1941. His military papers showcase him as being a very good character, and after only a year he moved up the ranks. He transferred to Melbourne and then once again deserted the armed forces in December 1941. When the military allotment stopped coming, Dorothy, a dressmaker by trade, found a job at a uniform factory. Military authorities informed her that her pension would only be reinstated once they found Jakeman. Not only had he avoided supporting his legal wife Ruby and their children, he also seemed to be avoiding responsibility with Dorothy and their son John. It seems from the moment that he deserted that Hamilton went to live in Richmond, Victoria with Elizabeth Victoria Bond, and they had a daughter together. Despite identifying her as his wife on his 1942 enlistment papers, Hamilton actually never married Elizabeth, as Elizabeth was still legally married to Arthur David Nicholson, with whom she wed in 1935. Their daughter from that marriage, 6-year-old Patricia, lived with Elizabeth. On the 28th of July 1942, he joined the Australian military forces under a new alias John Hamilton, and that's where he's listed Elizabeth V. Hamilton as his wife. He put himself as 2 years older than he actually was. He put Bundaberg, Queensland as his place of birth again, and he said he was a munitions worker. So as John Hamilton, he was a twice bigamist father of 5 children, 3 surviving children with Ruby, 1 with Dorothy and 1 with Elizabeth, and he was deployed to Milne Bay in New Guinea. However, just before he embarked, he met Beryl Smith in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. On his army record, it states on the 6th of May 1943, he embarked at Townsville for Milne Bay. After 6 months in active service, he was given an office job as a native overseer, but on the 23rd of February 1944, after a bout of malaria, he came back to Australia. He disembarked at Brisbane on leave on the 6th of February 1944. On the 28th of February 1944, he baptised himself under the name of John Hamilton. Within a month of arriving in Sydney, he firstly verified that his legal wife Ruby had indeed finally obtained a divorce, so within a week he married Beryl Vera Smith at Lakemba, New South Wales, under his new name John Hamilton, with his own father serving as witness. The couple moved in with Beryl's parents, and when Hamilton married Beryl, he had instructed military authorities to stop Elizabeth's allotment. On the 12th of August 1944, he was discharged, and the reason for his discharge was to enable him to take up employment as a dairy farm hand for Mr. Pilgrim in Parramatta. This dairy farm was only a few kilometres away from his parents' home. His Jakeman military papers reveal that a certain Mrs. Wilson wrote to the Melbourne Enlistment Office trying to establish the fact that James Jakeman was the same as Corporal John Hamilton. Military authorities and constables from 5 different police stations, amongst them North Melbourne Detective Rossengren, combined their efforts to bring Hamilton to justice. On the 31st of May 1944, a warrant was issued. It had taken 5 months to gather all the evidence to prove Hamilton had committed bigamy back in 1940 when he married Dorothy in Queensland. So he was first arrested at the end of August 1944 on a charge of military desertion. He was taken to Queensland, where he was detained at the Grovelly Military Detention Camp in Brisbane while police investigated the suspected bigamy. Then he was officially charged in September 1944. He pled guilty in the hope to avoid the limelight. He told the arresting officer that he did not desire any evidence to be called or any witnesses to appear in the court, adding that he considered his marriage to Beryl a good one and he didn't want to jeopardise it. Hamilton made it clear that he wanted to begin a new life with a clean slate. On the 2nd of October 1944, it featured in the Daily Mirror in Sydney. Casanova given a term in jail. Brisbane. Described by Judge Phillip as a modern Casanova, John Hamilton, 37, a soldier, was sentenced in the criminal court today to 2.5 years jail for bigamy. In 1932, after marrying a girl whom he had been charged with abducting, Hamilton married another woman and was jailed for 23 months for bigamy. On pre-embarkation leave in Brisbane in 1940, he married another woman. Then he met a woman in Melbourne who bore him a child. Finally, after service in New Guinea, he was sent to a New South Wales military hospital and married once more, but in the meantime, his first wife had divorced him. Carefully considering Hamilton's record, Judge Phillips said, "I don't know whether women can't leave you alone or you can't leave them alone. Apparently you descend to bigamy to get your desires." Hamilton's attorney, Mr. Barry, responded to the judge's comment by pointing out Hamilton's skull was fractured in a gelignite explosion. Since 1930, his only troubles had been of a feminine nature. Philip did not buy the argument that Hamilton had sustained brain damage and the injury led to his womanising, nor that bigamy was of a less serious nature than armed robbery. And as you might recall, there was no mention of a skull being fractured with his injuries from that gelignite blast. The Truth newspaper described Hamilton as babbling on about his sentence. When he was sentenced, Hamilton placed his hands to his head, reeled from the dock and fell in a faint down the stairs. Hamilton appealed the length of his prison term. He argued that his sentence was harsh, given that since committing the offence he'd given the best 2 years of his life in the service of his country. He added that his sentence was more than double than of other bigamists. Active Chief Justice McCrossan responded to the appeal by saying, "This is not your first offence. You were sentenced in 1934 to 23 months imprisonment for bigamy," and the 3 appeal judges unanimously rejected Hamilton's request for a shorter sentence. And his army record said that he appeared before the police court at Brisbane on the 29th of December 1944 on a charge of bigamy and was convicted with 2.5 years imprisonment with hard labour. Due for discharge on remission on the 1st of November 1946. 6 previous convictions. This soldier was transferred from the HM prison in Brisbane to the HM prison in Townsville. Beryl petitioned for divorce in 1946, but according to the electoral list, she kept her surname until 1949. She never remarried. When Hamilton came out of prison, he found his way back to Elizabeth Bond, his former de facto wife in Victoria. In 1949, they're listed in the census as John Hamilton, operator, and Elizabeth Victoria Hamilton, both living at Carinish Road. They're also listed in the 1949 census at South Melbourne. John Hamilton, 128 Thistlethwaite Street, rubber worker. Elizabeth Victoria Hamilton, same address, home duties. They had 3 more children together, and Hamilton shared his life for nearly 25 years with Elizabeth, known as Betty. John Hamilton, his christened name, was what he was buried under. On the 25th of January 1981, he died at the age of 74. Betty died on the 6th of April 1991 in Salisbury, South Australia. And a little on his children. His children with his first wife, Ruby Pearl Kendall. Well, they had 4 children together. Ruby lived with her mother from February 1935. After Ruby divorced Eric in May 1943, she married Eric James Maxwell in Redfern in that same year. Ruby died in 1971 at the age of 58. The first child was June Pearl Hamilton. She was born on the 2nd of November 1932 in Paddington and died only 1 day old. Ruby May Hamilton was born on the 15th of December 1933 in Sydney. She married Thomas William Qualm in Newtown in 1951 under the name of Ruby May Maxwell, her stepfather's surname. She died on the 2nd of May 2014 in Gelston, New South Wales. John Eric was brought up as a Maxwell, and the fourth child was Brian Thomas Maxwell, who was born on the 9th of May 1935. His son that he had with Dorothy Bury, well, first of all, Dorothy married Alan Barnes in 1947. John was born in January 1941 and he was brought up as John Barnes. He never met his biological father, but there is a photo of him from John Barnes's personal collection and there's a very strong resemblance to his father. He had 4 children in total with Elizabeth Bond. One son, John James Hamilton, was born on the 2nd of June 1948 in Melbourne. He married and had 3 children and he died in 2020. So I hope you enjoyed the story on the double bigamist, William Eric Hamilton.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.